she was calling you Catherine June, and
I understand that. I'm familiar with the Persian community.
Okay.
I lived in Paris for a long time.
Sorry about that.
No. Don't apologize. Never assume, right?
Yes.
No, I should have clarified. Okay, so good. We're live, Instagram and Facebook. We're good.
We're waiting a few minutes for some of the people who have technical difficulty to join us.
And we're excited to have all of you here with us today to talk about, sorry, CSW65 and some of the agreed conclusions. This is part of what the Women's Intercultural Network was actually built around, was to report back to the community regarding different events that have happened regarding women's issues, some of the different panels that have occurred, everything from things as formal as CSW65 to movie nights that we've seen that ICWIN has put on, very important films regarding women's rights in the Middle East, particularly within the Afghan community and the Iranian women. And this is one of our goals as WIN, is to help connect all the different women around the world and what they're going through, and to support each other. Sorry, I need to have some water. 1 second, I will be back for a second. And right now we're just waiting for a couple of our panelists who are having some issues getting on this afternoon. However, before we really formally get started, I might as well take this time to tell you a little bit about who will be joining us. First of all, we have Elahi Ameni, who's right here, who is a very esteemed a civil rights advocate. She served in the California State University system for over 31 years as administrator and lecturer for women and gender studies. She's been involved in the women's global movement since the 3rd UN Women's Conference in Nairobi. And she has attended almost all of the CSW meetings in New York, as well as been at the conference, was at the conference in Beijing and China. She is currently the president of the Women's Intercultural Network, and it also has worked as a mediator internationally. She's one of the delegates of the Women's Intercultural Network to Afghanistan, and speaks Farsi, and has contributed to the coalition building of Afghanistan women's organizations in Kabul after the Taliban was removed. She has served in many leadership roles, both nationally, statewide, and globally, on all levels, including such things as the chair of the international interest of American Association University of Women in California. She's chaired the Coalition of Women from Asia and the Middle East, a women's human rights organization that is actually based in California. She's a founding member of the Iranian Circle of Women's Intercultural Network, as well as many other international and state organizations she's been involved with. She's also very well published in both English and Persian, and we are so fortunate to have her with us here, as well as being on the the Women's Intercultural Network. And I can say that she's a great friend to have. The second, one of the other people who will be joining us is June Marie Justice, who serves as a policy director for the U.S. Women's Caucus at the UN, and is a longtime delegate to the UN Commission on the Status of Women. She serves on the boards of the Women's Intercultural Network and several nonprofits working on women's rights and empowerment. She too is a wonderful friend and a great resource and a great advocate for women and human rights. The third person we'll have joining us this evening is Dr. Gail James, and she's also a board member of the Women's Intercultural Network and has been deeply involved in the Cities for CEDAW initiative, which she is currently heading for the Women's Intercultural Network, and is a wealth of information for anybody who is interested in Cities for CEDAW and wants to know more about it. She is also on the boards of the U.S. Women's Caucus at the UN and the Women's Equality Coalition, and has been a long-serving delegate to the UN Commission on Status of Women. So we're very fortunate to have these three speakers who will be with us this evening. And there's Gail. Hello, Dr. James. How are you?
Hello. Sorry, had a little trouble connecting, and June Marie is on her way also.
Okay. Well, I've just done our introduction, Gail, and with that, I am going to let you talk a little bit about Cities for CEDAW and our panel that we did for CSW65, and what you think of how some of the agreed conclusions that relate to CEDAW, and your thoughts as to CW65 this year.
Oh, this is my favorite topic, so I'm glad you asked me. So yes, we had great pleasure in putting together a wonderful panel that included our founding mothers, our four mothers, Sun Young Yoon and Krishanti Dimaraj, and orchestrated with Elahi's help. We also had the newest member of our CEDAW community, which is the mayor, the city of Irvine, and the mayor of Irvine was with us, explaining the process that they use to acquire a resolution and to move forward toward an ordinance. More than that, we had practitioners, actual people on the ground at the grassroots, having very successful Cities for CEDAW initiatives in Pittsburgh and in Cincinnati and in San Jose. And so those people were with us, and I'll put their names in the chat so you can they can be contacted at any time, because they're ready and willing to assist us and assist anyone wanting to do an initiative. Also joining us was Alice Kitchen from Kansas City, who is one of my colleagues that I've working with the city council here in Kansas City, trying to do an initiative, and have now just completed a gender study. So everyone was at a different stage. And I think that's the secret. There are two secrets of CEDAW, Cities for CEDAW, which is persistence and persistence. And then the third piece is to be prepared that it could move in any direction. In other words, you never know when the mayors will change, when the city council members will change. And so therefore, the support can waver. And we have found many cities who have experience that, but all the coalitions keep going. And I think that's the other main point, which I held up 2 fingers, but I really meant to have 4, because the key to CEDAW success is coalition building. And we found all of the people working on CEDAW to be experienced and comprehensive in their coalition building. And that's really crucial. And so it was a very successful event that afternoon, because we had so much interest. And when I was asked to say what were my takeaways or what did I find the most interesting about that event, I would say that the overarching enthusiasm of the participants and of new people who have heard about CEDAW, who have initiatives going that we hadn't heard about yet. For example, in Bozeman, Montana, there's a very active CEDAW task force that we hadn't known about. So that person joined us, and we had information about a thriving CEDAW initiative in San Diego. And so those cities are really moving toward a much more robust Cities for CEDAW initiative. I would say in terms of the agreed conclusions, a couple of things. Every year, Marilyn Fowler, our founder and mentor and great foremother, always prepares for the agreed conclusions. During CSW, we meet and talk about the agreed conclusions and what contribution WIN wants to make. And you can carve out or take a slice of an issue or many issues that you want to address that year. So always we meet and discuss, and WIN always submits something. This year, because it was an odd sort of experience with being totally virtual, we made a contribution, but I think we were also key to how are we going to find out more about the agreed conclusions and who is meeting and what the process was and what version there would be at any given day and who had access to it. And I think in final conclusion was that there was a sense of disappointment. And I see now, a month later online, there's still a lot of people asking, what shall we do for next time? Because we weren't happy with how it turned out. And the reason, I think, was twofold. One was the participation of civil society and how the NGOs were able to contribute their expertise into the final draft. And secondly, how it was conveyed to civil society. It was conveyed in a peremptory sort of way. Here is the document and in the final outcome. We didn't have a lot of input in as much as we have had in other years. And then also, as a final conclusion to that process, we learned that some of our most important issues and topics were either not included in entirety or were excised completely, such as the education of young girls. For example, we are committed, all of us, working toward the education of girls around the globe. We have succeeded in primary education. We're now working on secondary education. We find that a lot of that has been taken away. The final conclusion doesn't include as much as we had wanted about providing for girls secondary education, because families and member states are not always in support of that for traditional reasons. And then secondly, we have been working in recent years on widows, on the aspect of widows and their identity, their livelihoods, their cultural contributions. And we have found that to be not supported by the member states in the final document. So those are some of our problems with the final edition of the draft. And so what we have concluded is that we will have to work differently. NGO CSW and FW MAP are now trying to put together an initiative so that the working methods are improved. So there's more input from civil society and the NGOs. And also that we start sooner. As I understand it, that committee, the Civil Society Committee, is now meeting. Instead of waiting till the fall, as they usually do, they're now starting this spring to get ready so that they can build their case for all of the issues that they want to be concluded. So all in all, it was a unique and very special CSW, but it did have a dark side, as anything connected with human rights and the UN does. But we all came away very pleased with what WIN contributed in terms of our events, as well as the participation that we got. The attendance was excellent and the feedback was excellent.
Well, thank you very much for that report. We really appreciate that, Dr. James. And one of the things I'd like to say is that anybody who has a question or would like to make a comment, please use the chat section. And at the end of our presenters, we will be happy to direct any questions that you have towards them or be able to answer them if we can ourselves. Now I'd like to welcome June Marie Justice, who has just joined us, and she can tell us a little bit about the panel that she was on for WIN at CSW65 and her feelings and observations regarding the agreed conclusions. Welcome, June Marie.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Gail, for that breakdown. Really helpful. It was an exciting time for WIN because we came together sort of at a pivotal time in the organization's development with transitioning, as you mentioned, about Marilyn being our founding mother, and a lot of the work she had done to lay the groundwork and really do so many great different advocacy strategies all around CSW throughout the years. So it was great to kind of pick that up, and Elahe stepped in and really helped us to forge forward. So we had a few panels at CSW, and one that I worked on, which was, I think, very timely given the context of what was happening with the pandemic and the theme of CSW. So this year it was women's leadership, as well as a sub-theme of violence against women. And so what we decided to do for WIN, because we have so many women throughout the world in various regions, we thought we should kind of come together and look at how these themes are playing out regionally, but then see if there's some lessons that we can pull from across borders. So we pulled together a panel of women. One of them is an individual who had fled Kabul. She was running a leadership program in the city of Kabul, and her husband was targeted. She was targeted by the Taliban, and she had to leave, and she's in exile. So she was able to offer us perspective on what that was like in terms of what were some of the real tangible sorts of barriers that were cropping up for her in trying to reach out and continue to build capacity for Afghanistani women. And she had mentioned that there was a difficult time for her trying to secure her rent for her building so that she could create this space, because the what's equivalent to the mayor had been receiving pressure from the higher levels of government not to support women doing leadership programs. So we were trying to think creatively, how can we continue to help support these Afghanistani women, especially given that there's even more pressure on them now with the US pulling out. And so she was able to offer us a little bit of insight and some of the strategies that we were able to employ in terms of helping to maybe find creative ways to be able to secure a lease for her through another organization. So we were trying to figure out how can we leverage ourselves across borders to help women who don't have a voice where they are. So she was incredible in that regard. And then we had Elahe talk to us about the situation in Iran, and so many of the young girls and women who are facing greater increases of violence and child marriage under these circumstances really brought some insight into the situation there, and highlighted a couple of case studies as well. Then we had an individual named Marge Grow, who is a Native American woman who is the leader or director of missing and indigenous women in the Californias. So she handles, and the Western United States. So missing and murdered indigenous women, as we know, yesterday I think was the I don't know, what do we call it, the day of honor that we honor missing and murdered indigenous. And so it just really reminded me just how powerful hearing from her was, because she herself had been the victim of almost a femicide. And she helped us to understand some of the unique ways that women's leadership is addressing the challenges. And one of the things that she's done is created events at the Capitol, and where she's brought together these symbolic sorts of elements. Like they put together a teepee, and it has all these red handprints on it that symbolize the thousands of missing and murdered indigenous women and girls. And what a statement that made for the governor and for other people to draw attention to what's happening. Then we had an individual who deals with Mesoamerica, And what brought together all of these themes was an Egyptian woman who works across the globe on violence against women for the Global Fund for Women. And it was really a wonderful opportunity for WIN to partner with the Global Fund for Women and to just really learn from each other about the different sorts of ways that we're reaching individuals and trying to support given these horrific circumstances. As you mentioned, Gail, about there's been this sort of rollback in rights across the board, and the rise of autocrats and the rise of pluralism has created a lot of pressure on the human rights agenda, and in particular, women's rights. So the agreed conclusions reflected a little bit of this, because I think there were some sacrifices made around language, around gender. There was a lot of pushback on things that we wanted included that were not considered priorities for some of the member states that are really leaning more towards the conservative autocratic governments. So that was a little bit frustrating, but as always, and the leadership of the women and their bravery, their deep wisdom, so much deep wisdom, especially for those of us like myself who are fortunate to be living in America, to be able to sit back and really take in and try to understand the context of what's happening around the world for others, and really try to learn from them. So there was a lot of wonderful learning that occurred. There are so many different sessions that are available. So if anyone is registered on the platform, you can go back and listen and learn some more. But I think for me, the biggest takeaway was really just the ability to be inspired again, as I always am, by the leadership and the strength and the solidarity. This was the largest virtual gathering apparently ever, with over 20,000 people online on the platform. So it's an exciting time. It's a challenging time, but it's certainly a time that we all need to be leaning on one another and learning from one another. So I'm really grateful for Elahe and my team right now, because it's really been an honor to watch WIN transition as we move this journey forward and continue to try to affect this change. So thank you. Catherine, you're muted. You're still muted.
Thank you so much, June Marie. We really appreciate your insights and so forth. Yeah, you have to learn to continue to roll your arrow off of once you press, right? Yeah. Elahe, June, would you please tell us about your thoughts and so forth to do with CSW65, as you have been someone who has experienced so much throughout the history of this series of CSWs.
Thank you very much. First, I want to appreciate Gail and June Mary and you to join us and for their presentation and giving this comprehensive report to the community. I also want to thank Iranian Circle of Women's Intercultural Network technical team to be online early, and this event is being live broadcast from Facebook. Thank you very much, Roja and Sudijan. So I have to mention, after 2 years delay, because last year CSW it was canceled. It was just a short consultation day. Half a day was met, and this was a big year last year for those of us who are following global women's movement. It was the 25th anniversary of Beijing Platform for Action, which is the most visionary agenda of women's rights and empowerment everywhere. The disappointment was felt by all of us. But this year, as June Mary also mentioned, more than 20,000 women, feminist diplomats, and more than 850 accredited civil society organizations finally gathered predominantly online. There were some diplomats at UN, but predominantly online for the 65th session of Commission on the Status of Women. I have to mention that this year, the chair of the commission was Armenia. This is also a position that actually each year one of the members that are selected to the commission, and the duration of their appointment is for 4 years, chairing the CSW. And this year was Armenia, and next year is South Africa. So I have to mention, for many of us that live in United States, for all of us actually, as I see the names on the screen, for many of us live in United States, it was a America attempt to re-engage with CSW. And of course, White House sent a message, a strong message around gender equality, especially on sexual and reproductive health. This was very important because the previous administration, during the previous administration, the representation of UN was predominantly allied with countries that they are barriers to advancing women's rights, like Saudi Arabia, that currently is a member of Commission on the Status of Women, Bahrain, or even Russia. They actually was opposing using any language that advancing women's rights and equality. So to continue that and to emphasize the re-engagement of United States, actually Vice President Kamala Harris, sent a message to UN Commission on the Status of Women, and she was the first woman vice president, and I believe the first vice president that ever sent a message to CSW. This was to emphasize the re-engagement of United States. I have to mention that this year, similar to the last 26 years, the tension in the language and final document was around words like reproductive right, gender identity, family, and gender. Because many conservative countries that they are as part of the norm of CSW and UN, they've been elected as in their bloc, like Asia Pacific. They have certain number of seats at CSW, same as Africa, same as Western Europe and North America. So these countries that participate in Commission on the Status of Women, they're not necessarily believe in gender equality or have policy in that regard, but this is part of the way that the commissions of UN are being organized. So this year we are glad that US actually didn't align with the conservative forces that the last 4 years allied with it. But the tension was around those issues. So long meetings at CSW, as we got report or some of the video cast on it, long meetings every night till 11 p.m. and actually 2 nights till morning. So that was the reason that when I was reading the Courtney Nemroff, the US Deputy Representative to the Economic and Social Council, which CSW is under that, she mentioned that democracy was in red alert, with women being raped in Tigray, killed in Myanmar, and shot in Atlanta, Georgia. And she was alarmed that concern about women's rights defenders, sexual and gender-based violence, and disability almost didn't get to the document. And she emphasized in her closing remarks that US would not stop fighting for women, and her statement was very passionate statement, that these are all available online. If the other 2 countries that provided a statement that was noteworthy was Argentina, and I'm quoting, the group proposed to include the principle of non-regression in the text in order to acknowledge the adverse trend, in order to build consensus and support during the negotiations. Our group meaning Argentina, had to forego several essential references of our regional topic that our delegations considered to be intimately linked to the priority theme. We will not cease in our efforts to protect and respect human rights of women in all their diversity. Another noteworthy, which I felt when I read that, I felt it worth mentioning it here, was from Tunisia, a predominantly Muslim country. Quote, "We need to think about what messages we need this commission to send, the United Nations to send to all the women and girls all around the world. When we don't want to provide sexual and reproductive health services to women and girls, victims of violence, including rapes, when we do not want to acknowledge multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination exist, and when they do, women and girls are further left behind." This statement was from Tunisian delegate. So back to some of the positions on US that particularly for those of us in Women's Intercultural Network, that we coined the term of cities for CEDAW, meaning that because US is one of the 5 countries that has signed but has not ratified CEDAW, and along with Iran that neither signed or ratified, and 3 very small countries that if you go over the Pacific, you probably don't see them. This is how small they are. But on CEDAW, I'm quoting from the statement, official statement of US mission, quote, "For the United States, this understanding includes references to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. The convention, these are the convention, I have to mention that US has not ratified the Convention on All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which is CEDAW, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and the Convention on the Rights of Child, to which we are not party." So these are in official position of US. "We understand abbreviated or imprecise references to certain human rights to be shorthand references for the more accurate and widely accepted terms used in the applicable treaties, and we maintain our long-standing positions on those rights. Moreover, this text does not create or elaborate any new rights under international law." So unquote. So this was as part of the official statements of US mission, and these are the international treaties that US has not signed and has been on the agenda of civil rights organization in US, including Women's Intercultural Network and other organizations that we are striving to commit our government here to sign, to ratify CEDAW. On other issues on sexual and gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, US took a very good position along with other countries, but the barrier was with countries, more conservative countries, where the language was objected because, for example, they emphasize gender is providing a broad definition of that these countries are opposing to it. They've been opposing those terms since the Beijing conference. So those are some of the challenges for the final document. Gender identity this terminology didn't get to the final, and that was very disappointing for many civil rights organizations and human rights organizations. Again, for some conservative countries, particularly in Asia, they didn't embrace and they didn't vote for it, and basically emphasizing on the role of motherhood and family, contrary to gender and gender identity. So those are not really, they usually bracket it in the final document. And the last thing that's very close to my heart is the language on women, peace, and security. As we know, last year was the UN Security Council 1325, which I have done extensive work on it and provide training globally on that issue. That was passed in October of 2000. And so last year was 20 years anniversary of that. It was great if the terminology or this reference to this document was being mentioned in the, but it wasn't mentioned, even not mentioned in the security, in the national agreed conclusion. So women peace builders contribute, we know that they contribute to preventing and ending conflicts. And a whole host of research and literature on this issue shows that if women are 30% of the negotiator of peace, peace negotiator in, then the contract is lasting much longer, and this is based on 20 years research on this issue. But definitely right-wing extremists and religious extremist fundamentalists, they were opposing to participation of women and women being part of the negotiators on peace and conflict. This was kind of a short, very short report on that. There is so much to talk and so much to hold our governments globally accountable for what they support, the language that support or the language that they oppose at this convention. And that requires all of us engagement to make change possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Elahe. One of the things that you mentioned is participation, and we all get excited when CSW comes around. However, there are so many different things that we ourselves need to encourage ourselves and those around to engage in to help get to these agreed conclusions. It's not just CSW that does it, it's all the work that goes behind it, and each and every woman who gets involved in those different things. One of the things that we will be doing as WIN is we're going to be having regular panels, and this June we are going to be having a panel on LGBTQ issues and some of the things that are faced here. And one of the things that rung to me when you were speaking, Elahe, had to do with the a lot of the pushback on the definition of gender and that sort of thing. And as a civil rights attorney in New York, who's dealing a lot with some of the legislation that we've been trying to put through, one of the interesting things in New York State itself, which is definitely not considered a red state, is the ERA, the Equal Rights Act, which we have not been able to pass on a state level for it's been decades. It's been over 20 years. And part of the biggest pushback is exactly the issues that you were identifying, to do with language, to do with some of the more conservative nations in the world, which I find to be quite fascinating. We know that the Generation Equality Forum in Paris is coming up, which we encourage everybody who's able to join. And I believe that's going to be by Zoom as well. What I'd ask our panelists, if you'd like to chime in, if there are any other upcoming events that you think would be really great for people who are listening to participate in, to help build towards the next CSW, and even push to help push the agreed conclusions even further in the towards the rights of women and children.
I'll say a word that CSW, NGOCSW.org has a website. They are putting out a survey right now, and they would like to know what people are thinking. For those of you who did attend, if they have 20 or 25,000 women who attended, they would like to have at least most of that support back in the survey. What did they think of the events? Plus, the most important thing, how would we make the process for agreed conclusions better, different? They would like to know that, and they're asking for people to. So I would ask for anyone who has a moment to. It is a lengthy survey, and they're asking for actual qualitative comments, not just yes or no. So it's they really want a substantive response, but I'd suggest that people weigh in, and then perhaps next year it will be a document more in line with what we were hoping for.
On that note, I want to emphasize, Catherine, on the note that Gail made. During the last 26 years since Beijing conference, the issue of more engagement of civil society in the work of commission has been on the agenda, because throughout these more than 2 decades, we have seen that the language are being more opposed. Beijing Declaration was very progressive document, and that's why we never had the 5th International World Conference or the 6th, exactly because of the rise of either religious extremism in position of power or the right-wing politics globally in Europe, and we saw the last 4 years in United States, that globally, particularly women in the South, in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, we felt that if globally we have the 5th International World Conference, the document would be a step back. So we hold it on the Beijing document and provided Beijing +5 review, Beijing +10 review, 20 and 25. So it's very important that we encourage, and I want to, as Gail mentioned, I want to encourage everybody to take a few minutes of your time and fill out that survey, because we have seen really that the women's rights, gender equality, and human rights are being pushed back every year. And so we are not making the progress that globally women and girls are expecting. So we need to have more engagement of civil society, and also generation equality is another initiative on that path to provide a global support, like a safety net to the CSW, agreed conclusion, so that we can hold on what we have and not let it be more regressive in terms of UN and UN agencies and the governments.
Thank you, June Marie. Do you have a comment to make?
So in terms of supporting the work going forward, I think since so many individuals on this call are based in the US, just the awareness that we now have this Gender Policy Council that reports to the president based in the US, I think just trying to ensure that we are locally and at the national level really reaching out to those who are in positions of authority and to our elected officials, and making sure that we're constantly talking about what needs to happen at the international level, and that needs to be a part of their agenda, to educate ourselves on this idea of a feminist foreign policy, which there's been so much work done in this last year by about 80 organizations, I believe, and now this has been put forth into that house and I'm not sure what the bill is, but really just trying to get educated around that, because I think that would be a wonderful way to support this work here in the US, but have ripple effects that really go across the globe. So definitely that. Our new representative, Linda Thomas Greenfield, was wonderful. She's the appointee to the UN, and she did give us a briefing prior to the CSW, and that was incredibly helpful and very new. We hadn't had that in the past, so we were encouraged by that. But that stated, then there was a lot of ambiguity about who are they appointing to go to Paris, to go to Mexico City. How is this all going to work? So I think they were still finding their footing. but it is, as citizens, it's helpful for us to just know what the structures are, who are the people, and how we can continue to talk about it so that everyone is educated around who the people are that are making these decisions and how we can help to influence their policy positions going forward. Yeah, and then of course the Equal Rights Amendment, as Catherine had mentioned, that right now there was oral discussions on that yesterday about this arbitrary deadline that's in place to try to get this constitutional amendment finally solidified. So I would definitely encourage activity around that as well. So thank you.
One of the comments that I would like to make too is I think we all have to remember too, a lot of this can happen at the kitchen table. And I know that can be very a kitsch thing to say in the sense, but in the sense of raising girls and boys, children, to appreciate the importance of women's rights, girls' rights, and children's rights right from the beginning. Those are the people who will be our future leaders. And it is so important to keep the movement diverse in terms of ethnicity, in terms of age, and in terms of socioeconomics as well, and to be able to hear the voices and allow room for those voices, because those from the predominant culture don't necessarily have the answers for everyone or anyone. And it's so important to have equal voices in the room. If anybody else, do any of our panelists have any more comments they'd like to make? At the moment, we have no questions in our chat room. If anybody would like to post a question, please do. Otherwise, we will invite you all to look out for our announcement for our June panel and panelists regarding our LGBTQ panel, and we look forward to seeing and hearing from you all again.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to see everyone. Thank you. Onward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting us, Dr. Amani. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Molly.
A couple of comments in the chat. I see a few things in the chat.
Yeah, I had questions regarding LGBT, but I can wait until next because I know Dr. Amani
Yeah.
connection.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Molly. You can present your question here. We still have a few minutes, and then we can embrace it more at the event in June.
Absolutely. So as you know, Dr. Amani, I have been working with the Iranian refugees in Turkey as well as in Greece extensively during the past 6 years until I got to know you, and you mentioned that actually I can bring this one up. Many of them, of course, are displaced women and children, especially younger women, and you know the system in Iran, Dr. Amani has been talking about it, I'm pretty sure. So many of them have been in that country for between 5 to 10 years without, being given a destination. But among them are the LGBT community, especially the lesbian women contact me, or a young gay man. Usually they contact me to see what can we do for them. They are being abused. Even they escaped the Iranian regime because of the abusive behavior of, that system anyhow. They came to Turkey feeling that, they are going to get a final destination where they can find peace and security. But unfortunately, they have many horrible stories. We have been trying to help them, but how can we help them? Or how can UN or UN Women or, any organization that you folks are working with can help them? That's why basically it's my question. So is there any way, any channel that we can open communication? I can even bring, one or two of them. They don't speak English because they're Iranian, but they are living under fear. That's all I tell you. They live real quietly. They don't let anybody to know. Like one of them is a very talented, tailor. and designer, clothes designer. So anyhow,
Thank you, Molly. Definitely for our June program, we try to touch these issues. Also, by the way, I'm not Dr. Amani. I'm simply Elahi Amani. So I always share that because people assume I'm Dr. Amani. I'm just simply Elahi Amani. And also we know that the Turkey situation is moving to the right. Actually, Turkey is coming out of Istanbul Convention, which is the Violence Against Women Convention for EU countries. So we're going to touch on those issues. And perhaps, you know, Catherine is a lawyer, civil rights lawyer. We have a group of lawyers as part of Women's Intercultural Network Board. So we try to address and provide some strategies to address the discrimination that these women that they flee Iran because the sentence for being part of LGBTQ community is death, and they came to Turkey and they're still experiencing those. So we thank you very much. We definitely gonna respond to it at our June event, and thank you very much for participation. Check out the website of Women's Intercultural Network, and we encourage everyone to be member. We need the support of everyone in doing what we're doing, and look forward to see you again in our future events. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
thank you very much. Thanks.